A student in our Photography and Friends Plus community asked about these amazing portraits by photographer Jeffries and was asking for advice on how someone would be able to capture photos like this and also edit them. So I am going to take a stab at recreating this style of portrait in this video. So there's a couple things I'm gonna do. One is I'm using a wide angle lens. I can tell from the shapes of people's faces that it's stretched a little bit. Typically that's not something you wanna do, but in this instance, it kind of brings you really close to your subject and that gives it a certain feeling. The other thing, there's a clue on his Instagram page. There is a sort of behind the scenes photo where you see him with a bounce card literally inches away with his lens from his person that he's taking a photo of. So that's another clue that he's super close. So you've got to be wide to get the full face. And in those photos, he's outside. A lot of these photos, it looks like the background is sort of like either he edits it and makes it sort of a texture, or he brings some sort of backdrop that has like a subtle texture to it. We'll play around with maybe fixing something like that up in YouTube or in Photoshop. And then a lot of editing work. So bringing out textures, making it a little bit of grungy, super contrasty, black and white. So let's go find a bounce card. That's what I need first. And I'm just gonna be doing it as a self-portrait right now. All right, so I'm outside. I found a piece of paper that's going to work as a bounce card. Now, of course, they make those pop-up ones. I have a super big one, a big white bounce card, but it looked like in the photo he was using something pretty small. You could probably get them on Amazon for like 10 bucks or at a photo store and support local. But honestly, a piece of paper will do. And you could probably tell if I do this, just a little bit. It's hard to tell on the iPhone, but you see a little bit more light coming in and filling in the shadows at the bottom of my face. So I think that should work well. I'm against a wall in my backyard that has some sort of texture to it, so that might work. And another thing I did was I put it in black and white mode. So I am shooting raw, so I'm going to get the raw image, but this helps kind of, to me at least, kind of get a sense of what the final product's going to look like. Something to do when you are trying to do self-portraits, if you don't have anyone else to work with you, is set a self-timer on. So we got a 2-second self-timer, and now once I hit the shutter button, we'll have 2 seconds before I can get in front of the camera. All right, so now I'm going to take a couple pictures and see how this turns out. All right, so I took a few photos and now I'm gonna go back and look at his Instagram to see what kind of direction is he giving to people. Is he telling them to look straight to camera, look around, look up, down? Maybe he doesn't give any direction, but I wanna just make sure that I got enough options to pick one that will kind of match that style and vibe. So I'm back here behind the computer and I did a basic quick edit test and I'm gonna walk you through everything I've done, but I think I did a decent job getting the style that Lee does. Now, I wanna preface this by saying in no way, shape, or form do I think you can directly replicate exactly what Lee does, but what I was doing was basically I brought up this photo and I was trying to get a very similar vibe in terms of the style, the color, and the contrast, the texture, and things like that. And I thought I did a decent job for spending a few minutes doing this. So I'm going to walk through my entire process now. I basically brought in all my photos, and as you can see, like when I'm going through these photos, even though it shows up black and white below, that when I'm shooting with my Fujifilm, it saves sort of the raw, unedited photos, but it gives you that preview of the black and white acros look that is included with Fujifilm. So here are a few options. I'm going to pick a different photo to edit. So I had this one where I was looking directly at the camera with my hand on my face. Let's see. I think this one's pretty good. Now, the one thing that I did notice is that in Lee's photos, the depth of field is a little bit deeper than some of these photos. I was using like an f1.2. This one's pretty good in terms of having my whole face in focus, because even like the pores on my skin from my nose to my ears, I think in most of Lee's photos, you have more in focus. Yeah, I think so. So I would probably use a deeper depth of field. Maybe it's the lens choice as well. This one, see, my eyes are a little bit out of focus, even though I like that look. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is change the color to black and white. Within Lightroom, you have these black and white color filters. So if you click on this little color picker right here, the profile, under black and white, you have a few different options. And I found that the black and white 3 looked kind of similar in terms of contrast. You could also just, instead of picking a specific color, you could click the color and then go to the black and white option and then click this drop down. You can, of course, too, just drop the saturation down below. If you're in the color mode, you can just drop your saturation below. But I feel like the black and white number 3 gave a little bit more punchy contrast that I was going for. Now, the first thing I played around with, because I thought this is what gives Lee's photos such a cool style, is the texture. Increasing the texture, the clarity, and even the dehaze a little bit. This brings out some of those details in my face that is sort of unique to his portrait editing. You typically don't want to bring out all of those creases, the wrinkles in my forehead and the pores, but I thought that doing this and really bumping up the texture helped a lot. And you can do this individually for the face, which we'll talk about later on with the masking tools, but I'm just doing it overall for the whole photo as well. In terms of the overall contrast and colors and stuff, I'm going to bring up my shadows just a little bit, but I don't want to go too much because there is a lot of contrast. One of the things that makes his photos so striking are the eyes. We'll be touching up the eyes in just a second, but I did want to show you, if you are in the black and white color profile, you can still change the black and white mix, which adjusts how things look. And I found, especially for my skin tone, bringing down the white, the red, and the oranges really brings out some of those details in your skin. So you're actually bringing down the saturation of those colors outside of the black and white mode, which when you're in black and white, it brings out some of those details. So even this before and after, pretty good, right? Let's jump straight to the eyes, because that's going to make this portrait pop even more. So if you click the masking tool, if you click the person, Adobe does an incredible job at just being able to mask all of these different things. So I'm going to select the eye sclera and the iris and pupil. Now it says create 2 separate masks, and I did that before. I'm going to create one mask with these 2, and with that mask now, just my eyes, I'm going to bring up the shadows, bring up see, actually, this is where I might do it separately. I messed that one up because I want to do it separately, because I want to bring up this exposure of my iris and pupil and not the eye sclera, which is the whites of your eyes. So I'm going to create 2 separate masks here. So now I have 2 masks. I'm going to call this sclera, pupils, just so we can stay organized. And with the pupils, I'm really going to bring up that contrast, that clarity down here as well. Just bring up the clarity and texture. Maybe bring up the shadows a little bit. and really sharpen those eyes as much as possible. Okay. So that's looking pretty good. Now my right eye, the left eye, is out of focus, and I wish both eyes were in focus. I think that would help. I'm looking at this portrait here, and you can tell the exposure of the eyes brings out a lot. Now, the other thing that we are going to be doing is the background of his photos is generally fairly dark, so we're going to have to use some masks to do that. Not in all of his photos, but in a lot of them. So that's looking pretty good for the eyes. Let's play around with the background. So I'm going to create a new mask. I'm going to select background. So now Lightroom does a freaking amazing job at doing that. I can just bring my total exposure down, which does a pretty good job. I'm actually going to increase the clarity and the texture to try to bring out some of that texture in the background, even though it's out of focus. I'm actually trying to bring back some of that. I don't mind that it's out of focus, but I want some of that, those detail, those textures in there. That's pretty good. And then you can kind of just play around with the exposure. And the cool thing about Lightroom now is we have this amount option, and we can just kind of duplicate everything we're doing or increase the effect of what we're doing by increasing this slider, which is pretty dang cool. So that's pretty cool. Another thing I might do to sort of blend what I'm doing to the outside of my head with sort of like what's going on the side of my head down below, what I'm going to do is add a mask and add a brush. When I do this, I have a fairly big size with a big feather, but then the flow and the density is lower. So you can see as I kind of brush on, that might even be a little bit too much of a flow. But let's go back to brush. Let's decrease that flow. Something like this. It sort of blends on rather than just directly like abruptly having an edge, which I think is going to look a little bit more natural. So let's turn off the overlay. Let's paint on here. That's looking pretty good. I want to make the vignette even more pronounced. So let's go ahead and create a new mask. I'm going to create sort of a custom vignette with some linear gradients. You could do this with pretty much any masking tool. You could do just a radial gradient. I'm just going to select like this corner, drop the exposure, and I'm going to drop the sharpness on this one actually. And then I'm also going to add another linear gradient on this side. So when I click this mask and choose add, it already applies those edits that I've made to the previous gradient here. That's pretty good actually. I kind of like that it's like coming from the top and bottom corners. One thing that I notice in his portrait is the hair really pops and shines. So here, what I'm going to do is create a new mask, person, select people, select myself, and then choose hair down here, create mask. And here I'm going to boost the shadows and bring down the blacks, just kind of increase that contrast quite a bit. See if I bring up texture even more, clarity, decreasing dehaze. That's interesting. That kind of helps too. Bring up the sharpness just a little bit. That might be a little bit too much. So what I can do is just back off the amount overall. So here's with it off. Here's where I was. Let's just bring it back down just a little bit. As always, I can use the backslash key to see the before and after. It's looking pretty dang good. The last thing I generally do with all my portrait or my editing is just see if the overall contrast looks good with the tone curve. And here I might just add a little bit more contrast to the blacks, pushing those down, bring back up the mids. I don't want to overexpose my skin too much, so I'm going to actually bring back down those like highlights. Something like that's looking pretty good. Pretty good, guys. Pretty good. What do you think? Is this coming along? The cool thing about this is I can try to copy and paste this to another one. So I'm going to try and copy and paste everything, even the masks. I might have to adjust the masks, but Lightroom now does a pretty good job at applying the mask, and it might have to reprocess it, but let's take it to one where I'm not looking at the camera. So that's my current edit. Here's the previous edit that I did. I think I have a lot more contrast in there. It's interesting. Just different time, different method. Let's do this one. So I'm pasting it, and it's gonna process it, but we'll see how good ooh, yeah. So there's definitely some things that didn't work as much as I wanted it. So if I click my mask tool, I can kind of see. So the hair is fine. This one is okay. I think the problem is this main one right here. There's something about the selection of the background that doesn't look that natural. So if I select this show overlay, it's not blending in as much as I want. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a bit of I can take this brush again that I was using, which is still applied. I'm just going to brush over the top of my hair right there. See how there's like those white spots? That does not look natural. And I might have to bring in some of these other masks to make it look a little bit better. This one, not as good. I don't think the background just looks a little bit fake to me. Maybe what I just need to do is take this background mask and decrease what's happening, and then I'm going to add a completely new radial gradient. Duplicate or invert that actually, and then just take the exposure down. Maybe I just need to crop in a little bit. I think I just prefer the picture of me looking directly at camera. So this one and this one here. This one, I think I need to boost the contrast just a little bit more to match that style of the first one. Oop. Here we go. That matches a lot better. And I can do a comparison with the RA right here. Drag reference photo. So now we can see the two edits that I've done. So what do you think? I think I did a decent job replicating this style. A few things that I would do are I would use a deeper depth of field so that my nose to my ears is in focus. I think that would bring out the textures even more. Maybe changing the background a little bit might help, but not bad. Try it out. Let me know what you think. I would love to see your photos. You can join the Photography and Friends Plus community for free at photographyandfriends.com/plus, where I got the inspiration for this video. And we do weekly live streams. We do weekly photo challenges, all kinds of fun stuff in that group. And if you have questions about editing styles, photographer styles, you get videos like this that I make or my co-instructors Will and Sam make to help you improve your photography. All right, much love. Have a beautiful day, and we'll see you in another video. Bye.